very excited to have Warren Nightingale and Mike Heilmann with us today. Mike and Warren, welcome. Could you tell us a bit about yourselves as educators? And Warren, do you want to go first?
Sounds good. Thanks so much for inviting us. I'm so excited to be here. Let me tell you, nothing beats a Saturday afternoon and being able to talk about, some of the fun things that we can bring to education. For me, I'm an educator. I've been doing it now for 26 years. As a career, it's been a billy map. I've done all kinds of scenarios in schools and different roles. Everything from, doing student services. Now I'm doing admin. But for me, it's always been about advocating for students. And from early on, I was tasked in one of my positions to impassion kids with their passions. So I brought my passions, and what those are games as well as film. And so a lot of what I've done has been trying to be a champion for those type of literacies in the classroom. So that's me.
Okay, and I'm Mike Heilmann. I've been in education for about 25 years. I've taught in Korea, northern Manitoba, rural southern Manitoba, and then for most of my career in Winnipeg, taught high school. I think the only grade I haven't taught is kindergarten. And about 13 years ago or so, I moved into admin, and I'm currently the principal over at Glenwood School in the Louis Riel School Division, and also right now president of GAME, and Warren is the vice president of GAME, the Gaming Association of Manitoba Educators. So a lot of gaming around everything that we do.
Yeah, and that's actually why we have you here today, is to talk to us about a little bit about gamification of learning and things like that, and just your experiences there. This is just a fun question before we get into that. How would you guys summarize what's going on in schools right now? Sort of think like a tweet version of it, Mike, if you wanna start.
Sure, I'd say currently survival, but refocusing on what's really important. To me, that means getting to the core of engagement in learning. Having students in front of us all day is no longer guaranteed. So when we do get them, we want to make sure that they're engaged.
Yeah, and I have to say that, echo Mike, like right now, of course, dealing with the pandemic, it's such a different time. Like right now in our building, we have 50% students, and so much of the conversation of the past is about, just really about laying grounds for the future, where right now it's almost laying ground for survival, and just, it's a different time. And and so that's kind of a wild time. Certainly right now, though, what I'm feeling like in general for all schools, like more than ever before, schools are just that sort of foundational pillar in the community to really take on all kinds of needs for supports, and just needs to be that safe place for all people and all families. And so that's kind of my take at the moment.
Yeah, definitely a retooling and reimagining of what's important in schools is sort of, I think, maybe the number one thing the pandemic is doing, or at least hopefully can do for us if maybe teachers push a bit.
So our second question here is, what does gamification of learning mean, and how can we achieve this? Warren, I guess, we can start with you.
Okay, so I would say gamification really is taking gaming elements and applying them to a non-gaming world. And so if we're going to look at education, that'd be like taking things like from the gaming world and apply that to what learning could look like in the classroom. I worked with one teacher, and it can be very small. Like I worked with one teacher who, just changed up some of the language, how we would use and talk to kids. And so instead of doing a quiz with the students, he would use the word scrimmage. Hey guys, we're just going to do a scrimmage today. Let's see how it turns out. So it sort of changes even just, the mindset. Like, hey, if we're doing a scrimmage, it's okay if I make a small mistake, because I'm back in the game to do something different. Or if the scrimmage doesn't turn out well, I can go back to practice and fine tune some things. And so, it can be something as small as that. Of course, there's programs out there which, you can be quite elaborate in terms of how you want to gamify, just even the function of a room, where you can have, students part of different guilds, and you can have a point system and different things like that. So, but in its essence, I think it's taking that mindset of what gaming is and all the benefits that we get from gaming, and apply it to a situation that you wouldn't normally apply it to really bring out the essence of the fun and the joy and kind of give it a different sense. Because even just a student who, let's say if they not do very well on a test or an assignment, they might take that on as a part of their identity. Oh, you know what? I'm not this, I'm not that. But take that same student and put them in a gaming situation, they could totally bomb out level 1. They're not going to let that define them. They're just going to go back and try that level again and learn from it and try it and try it until they succeed. And they don't even remember anything that they failed at. They just remembered, yeah, you know what? I am now level 2. And so it's taking that kind of mentality and applying it to education.
I think that's super interesting, just like the whole changing of the language, right? That we can apply just to really adapt kind of our mindset to education. And yeah, the gamification really allows you to do that. Mike, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, everything that Warren said, of course, I 100% agree with the gamification. I mean, it's really there to increase the motivation of students if we're applying it to education instead of just a broad general definition. If we're talking about education, we are changing those systems so that we can get kids engaged. I'd also add there's another half to this too, not I call, but it's called game-based learning. So it is different from gamification because you're using game elements as part of the design of your lessons and right from the core of what you're doing, or actually using games to teach the lesson. Minecraft, for instance, you're learning resource management, right? Dungeons and Dragons, you're learning about conflict resolution and that type of thing. So those type of things are done right in game, or if you can, like I said, actually craft lessons that are based on game elements instead of kind of pasting them on for motivation. So there's two sides of it, and both of them result in engagement and motivation. There's still lots of talk about which is more effective and what's going to do more, but it's a heck of a lot of fun trying.
Do those two, like gamification and game-based learning, do they go hand in hand? Or can you truly do one without the other, or is it kind of like a mix?
For me, I think they can be separate, they can be together. I almost would see it as a continuum as a teacher, though. You don't walk into a class and all of a sudden start designing lessons based on game theories, et cetera. You try to make things fun in the beginning, I think, and then you can move your way along as you learn more and more about gaming and gamification as well as game-based learning. For at least that's been our journey, I would say, and I'll let Warren pop in here, but my journey along this has been going along there. I always knew there was something, but as we learn more and more, then I'm leaning more towards game-based stuff myself.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll unpack lots of the elements of gamification. But the nice thing about game-based learning is when you implement it, so much of what you want kids, the skills that you want kids to really develop, and I'm talking about critical thinking and collaboration and how to be part of a community, those more than ever before, I would say, are the critical elements that students need to be walking away from the end of their journey of school. Those are the kind of the critical pieces we want kids to have. And so I know in my life, I kind of reflect going, well, I've always gamed. As a kid, board games is part of what you did at the family table. And, for me and my multiplications, well, it's because I learned how to do crib and count up points really fast. So you kind of start looking back going, well, you know what, there's some actual key things here. And it's just exciting to see how kind of gaming and, gaming elements has gained this sort of credibility over the years. Because if we were to have this conversation, even 10 years ago, people would be like, oh, come on, you guys, you just want to get together with some friends.
Oh, I wonder if we lost Warren there.
Mine's been crapping out on me here a little bit too.
Yeah. Mike, you're still there, though. Yeah.
I've still got you guys. Yeah, I've got Warren frozen on the screen, though.
Yeah, he's frozen for me, too.
Well, it is cold outside.
Dang, he was in the middle of saying something so cool, too.
Yeah.
It's okay. We can probably wait for him to see if he can join back. Or
Yeah.
Warren, I don't know if there's any way for you to finish your thought before you...
Yeah, I'm sorry I got cut out there.
Okay.
I have a couple devices going, and the one I was on all of a sudden just died on me. So I apologize for that, you guys.
Yeah.
But in true gaming fashion, all right, let's play that level again and keep on going. But I was just saying that in terms of for everything that we want our students to walk away from, it's funny how if you look at gaming, it actually inherently teaches these skills. And just as I jump back in the conversation, Mike's talking about community, and like gaming is a great way just to build community. Certainly, there's lots of great benefits to it, but just in that, it does forge friendships. And not that I could spout off the research off the top of my head, but I have come across readings that does suggest that even when somebody loses at playing a game, they still feel like they're part of a community. They still feel like they've bring value to it, and they still feel, even though that they've lost, they still feel connections to those who they play with, as opposed to, let's say, if they were to do other tasks and things by themselves. So
I've actually used civilization in a social studies class, and we did the whole empire. We did the whole thing about, we were learning about ancient Greece. So we did Alexander the Great's his whole conquest, and we went down to Egypt and stuff, and the kids were making the decisions and learning, and the kids were so engaged. It was fantastic. But I noticed you guys also were talking about board games a little bit. You guys are really into board games. There's probably lots of similar ones to some of the digital games using board games, but do you guys use a lot of games, and what's the educational value of a board game in a class? Or do you get kids to make games?
I'll start with that. I know Mike's got some good examples too. To be honest, all of it, both of like everything, like in our school, it looks everything from an after school activity where we do it as a club. Although right now that's looking quite a bit different because of all things pandemic, to as well as that teaching resource in the classroom to kind of highlight different lessons. Right now in one of our classes, the folks have been really utilizing Board Game Arena quite a bit to take on that element, because right now, even just engaging, touching the pieces and things like that, that's a little bit of that may not necessarily be the safest practice. So what other ways can we emulate that experience? And the website Board Game Arena does a pretty good job of replicating that game experience. Personally, I like it because then I don't make any mistakes in counting, because I hate losing to Mike, and so I hate if I didn't, he's a math guy in his background, so he's not going to miss things. But for the guy who's teaching English, I might be missing counting a point or two. So I like the fact that in that world it does those calculations for you, and then sometimes we also use it for some very specific tasks. We last year in our school, we really tried to focus on collaboration as a real skill right out of the gates with our grade 9s, to try and build and build and build. And we had a group who I would say, weren't quite hitting the marks we wished them to do in terms of working as a team. And so for a few straight days, I'm saying, okay, we're going to play Hanabi. Let's go. And Hanabi is one of these card games. It's a collaborative game, which Mike, I'm sure, will have a shot at me here in a second, because I'm not personally, I prefer the competitive games. But in this context, it worked really well with the class, because in this game, the students have to draw cards, but they can't look at them. And so they have to rely on everybody else as part of their team to get hints on terms of what their cards are, so that way they can play them in the right sequence. And in this case, it's to set off fireworks. But that's just whatever the theme can be, it is. But the real gem is the mechanics. So now students are forced to kind of work together and find a way to communicate. And then in the moment, try and problem solve, saying, okay, who at the table do I need to give the hint to the most right now? Or who's not really kind of buying, who do I need to bring in, so that way they know when it's going to be their turn to play in that sequence. And so it kind of forces that thing we wanted students to work on. So the nice thing about gaming is you can do a little bit of it just to, again, just establish community and connections, or you can actually design it in a way that you can, like, okay, here's a skill we need to practice. And what's nice is that it kind of brings sort of, it's not like all things in education, there's a million things we can access, and that's the magic of teaching, is we pull these different things for different purposes. So not one thing is a silver bullet, but I do find the flexibility of a gaming mindset really does have some benefit in lots of versatility in terms of how it can apply in different ways in our schools. So
Cool.
Good. A couple of points of clarification off of Warren's comments. Number one, he talks about when I've beat him. I believe that's been 2 times in the past 12 years. Warren wins all the time. Warren is highly competitive, so that's why he doesn't like cooperative games. He refuses to play them with us because if we're all going to win, why would we bother?
my friends.
But the cooperative game piece, I actually want to pick up on that because for people out there who are a little bit older and you would consider themselves non-gamers because they've been dragged through an 85-hour game of Risk or Monopoly where it didn't end, or another one of those games where it was just luck that caused your fate. Cooperative games are a great way to bring people and kids back into or to start into gaming because you can take them along with you and everyone's responsible for the decision. So no one looks stupid, quote unquote, while they're playing the game. So I love cooperative games for that. Forbidden Island and Forbidden Desert, those type of games. Pandemic, ironically enough, is a great game for right now. Those games are absolutely fantastic for that. Then after that, the competitive piece actually does become a motivator for students down the road, but it's certainly not the be all and end all. I think Warren's covered an awful lot of it, just talking about those soft skills that are learned through gaming. So I'll probably on to your next question.
Yeah, no worries. So I when I was looking at your schools, I noticed that both of your schools embrace sort of like a problem-based learning philosophy that my understanding really isn't anywhere else in Manitoba right now. So can you maybe just walk us through that a bit more, like what that looks like and how it relates to, game-based learning and gamification?
Sure. Glenwood's in the infancy of this right now. We tried to do a full year of it last year and got interrupted. Everybody in kindergarten to grade 8 is a project-based learning classroom. And these projects are based on the teacher's passion, whatever that may be, from gardening through social justice to building and design. It doesn't matter what it is. And the class then becomes absorbed in these projects. And a lot of the things that the students do in the projects reflect what we have to do in gaming. They have to solve real world problems. They have to deal with people outside of the school. They have to go out and collect information or interview or present to people. So they have to have those skills. I relate it back to board gaming and video gaming as well, because as Warren had mentioned, when you try to level, you don't stop if you don't get through level 1. You try and try again. I would say one of the differences between video games and board games is that in video games, you can learn kind of either the algorithm or the skills that you need to be able to do that and continue on. Whereas with board gaming, you can, you figure out kind of a strategy in a game, but then all of a sudden someone else is at the table who plays it differently and your strategy doesn't work anymore. And so that really teaches the kids to be able to pivot and work on strategies, both in real life as well as, of course, in board games.
Yeah, and I'm at Nelson McIntyre Collegiate, and this is our 5th year in terms of exploring project-based learning as a whole school. We've brought it along slowly. Like years ago, we started with the grade 9s, and we did grade 9s and 10s and 11s, 12s, and now we are wholesale as a school. And what that looks like is that all our core courses, so like for example in grade 9, we'd be looking at English and, well, with the exception of math, we'd be looking at like English and science and social studies, and then we also add in there technology. We teach that as one entire course. We bring them together as interdisciplinary courses, and students will investigate real life problems, and then we apply those learning outcomes of those courses within their inquiry work towards trying to resolve or trying to present on that problem. So, for example, we have grade 9s that will be taking a look at governance, and in the old style, I would say of something you might see in a classroom 10, 20 years ago. Teacher would come in and say, okay, everybody, this is our topic, and I'm going to introduce it to you. I want you to read, here's your readings. I'm going to bring in a video. Here's my notes. Make sure you take it all down, and we're going to do a test. Where in our model, we presented as, okay, what's interesting? Does this governance, is it still in line with how we need it to be in our country? Is it in a state of reform? Does it need to, is it still reflect? How does the Senate relate to us as Canadians in a post-colonial world? And so we present it in a way in which they're going to have to bring in some inquiry to the progress. So it's not just reading to kind of recite facts for a test, but rather they're going to try and solve something and say, okay, actually, you know what? The Senate is out of touch, or no, it's not. Like whatever they line, and that is, it's not the end point. It's the process of trying to solve that issue. And the critical piece is that they have that voice, to try and discover that, as well as they have an authentic audience to present to. And so we'll say to them, okay, you know what? Our MP, Dan Vandell is going to be coming by, and we invited some government officials, and now you're going to present your findings to them. And it's not about having high stakes, but it's about having an authentic audience. But because all of a sudden now they're going to have, people who are from that world that they're going to have to present to. And so I was interviewing one of our students 2 years ago. I was putting together a video, and I was asking him to talk about that. And he spoke to it, and he said, well, it's interesting. What he pointed out that I found interesting was that his terminology was, you know what, this is actually more important than a test. It actually matters. So he sort of framed it, because there's going to be real people who are going to be listening to what I have to say. And so he recognizes that, you know what, I better bring my A game for this, because there's something at stake here. So now, how that lines up with games and game-based learning and gamification, I would say it's about the process. Where if you look at trying to try and cram all information and get on the test, well, that's a one-shot deal. But the great thing about games and gaming is that you're in a constant feedback loop of, okay, do I have what I need? Oh, no, I don't. I better keep on going. And it's just, you're constantly getting that sort of, that journey of, am I learning with what I'm needing? Now, the one thing I would say is you do have to have faith in the process, because quite easily you can get frustrated and go, okay, I'm not even sure if I'm even in the ballpark with any of this. So in that sense, it's like learning a game for the first time, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to try this strategy. Let's see if it works. And again, we talked a bit about earlier, but it's not about having that define you, because we do want students to take risks. We don't want them to all of a sudden find, okay, you know what, I'm really good at writing essays, so every time I have a project, I'm going to write an essay. Well, we don't want that. We want them to take risks. And I find in a lot of schools, I think students do get comfortable in finding that thing that gives them the mark that they want, because it becomes about the mark. It becomes about, I want to get a scholarship, I want to get a mark, I want to get this, and I'm not going to go outside that comfort zone. I'm not going to take a risk. Whereas I think in particular with gaming, we can take risks, because you know what, if it didn't work, I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see what does work. And it's almost more like a true science. Okay, what happens if I try this, or what happens if I try that? And because it's not about, that end, there's not going to be like a mark at the end of what I'm doing right now. It's all about the authentic of just trying to explore and figure some stuff out.
It's interesting. I always think that kids know how to play the game of school, right?
Yeah.
You go in and you listen to and you give the teacher back what they want, nothing more, and then they're good at it and they get rewarded. Oh, you're the smartest in that. Yet they don't have those soft skills or those. So it's really interesting when you say that, because school is for a lot of kids just a game. How do I finish this game and get a pat on the back? So I really like what you're saying. It really speaks to me, because school should be way more than that. Those skills that you learn, and that's what we need: creative thinkers, problem solvers, because we don't know what the future is going to hold. And I love what you're saying.
Pete, I think you're so right in saying that. And I think in some ways, as a school system, we actually remove that, because if you look, and I'm sure Mike could speak to this, if you look at young kids, they'll embrace mistakes. I just want to explore things. I just want to try this out. Hey, what's over here? Let's take a look around. And then, of course, I spent my career with the kids at the higher levels, is that they like, oh, I better get this mark or else I'm not going to be able to get into this faculty. It becomes such a finite experience of school of what they need the outcome to be. It's almost like, well, where's the joy in learning now? It's almost like we gotta hold, and it's tough, and I get it, because there's lots on the line. There's scholarships and futures and those pieces. But if
but there's also a mindset too, right? Like people are stuck still back in the day kind of a thing. So that's a tough mindset to break.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is.
Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was to say that is what motivated me to start exploring what ended up being project-based learning. I didn't know when I started down that path what I was looking at, but was in being in elementary schools and seeing that joy and, yeah, we're going to throw everything to the wind to figure this out in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2. Then something happened in grade 3, 4. By the time they're in 5, 6, they're already processing the game that you refer to, which I would also argue is about as boring as Candyland, like that game of just let's spit this out so that we can get the marks. So that's what started me down that base of project-based learning. And I'll quite often talk about engagement and gaming and project-based learning all interchangeably, because for me, at the core of it is the engagement of the student in school.
So buy-in from students must be high. What about like staff coming in? Like, do you notice anything about it? Or like younger staff that are fresh out of ed, are they more likely to see the benefit of project-based learning, or is it the older staff members, the more experienced ones that see the value?
I think it's across the board for me. We had staff who are very near the end of their career embrace it and was like, this, I can't believe it's taken this long for us to do stuff like this, as well as on the flip side, some people right off faculty who the way I interview is not terribly normal. It's because we just start talking about projects and passions and stuff like that. And you can tell right away if someone's fired up about this or if they're like, this isn't it, and so I've been lucky enough to hire quite a few people just in my short time at Glenwood. And yeah, we have a crew there who love doing this stuff, and it shows, and we have a lot of fun. Of course, everything is with an asterisk for this past 6 months of school, of course, or year of school now with the pandemic. But it is, I don't think it's career stage related or age related. I think it really comes down to who the person is.
I agree with that, and I can't speak highly enough about the staff that we have, because man, do they work. They collaborate because they're forced to, because to all of a sudden we're doing school full year with those interdisciplinary subjects, and so we have a team of 3 teachers who are all going through the same processes. And they really work hard to kind of work together to see what's working, what needs to be tweaked, what we're going to do next time, how the kids are working, how the kids are collaborating. It's intense. Certainly, it's intense, but the payoffs are huge. And again, like the same with Mike, it's across the board in terms of age. There's actually something kind of exciting though, because there is a lot of autonomy for the teacher in that dynamic, because all of a sudden you sort of take away that that expectation to you need to do this in your classroom. It really is trying to emulate for the kids that, we're gonna learn this together, because we're removing them from in front of the classroom is really what we're doing. We're taking that sort of sage on the stage away, and we're putting them in the middle of the mix to say, okay, everybody, we're going to try and learn this together. And so for teachers, there's a bit of a leap of faith, because it's a profession where for the longest time, you're sort of on this pedestal of being from me, you'll get this knowledge, and before the internet, it was, I will give you this book and this will give you the knowledge, and it's all funneled through me, where now we know that's not the case. And we live in a world where we need to be collaborators, where everybody sitting at the table is going to be a lot smarter than at the moment we move 1 or 2 people away from the table. And so to emulate that, it can be pretty scary to be a teacher now, that, something that you say can easily be challenged and be fact checked even before you finish your sentence. Right. So it takes a bit of faith in that. And there's an educator from England, James Nottingham, who talks about the learning pit. And we talk quite a bit about that at school, where sometimes you just have to embrace that really feeling of uncomfortable, feeling uncomfortable on whether or not this is going to be successful or not. We want students to feel that, because the moment that they can work through that and sort of resolve that, and then all of a sudden get to the other side of that pit, well, now they've proven to themselves that they can be resilient. That, you know, they don't have to have the easy answer in front of them. They don't have to just, you know, they can take risks and be somewhere uncomfortable. And so it's an important lesson. And so it takes a really special educator to, you know, be in that world and emulate that and be part of that. And certainly I can't speak highly enough about the staff in our building, because they do it really well.
I want to work there. Sounds pretty cool.
Oh, that is awesome.
There's a lot of trust in that as well, because when we started along that route, it was, I said, curriculum doesn't matter, right? And now that, of course, it actually does, but there is no such thing as a curricular police. Well, at least not yet. It's probably coming. But there's no such thing as a curricular police that says, did you cover outcome 6-2-3? I'm more concerned about the bigger general learning outcomes of the exploration piece, and that to make sure that we're getting that, because when we start to drill down to the very specifics and we're basically teaching to the test, that's when we get back into that loop that Dean was talking about of just playing the game.
Yeah, and I think that playing that game is still that old mindset that we have from the industrialization of when schools first came, because when it was really created, we were looking at systems to ensure that we were creating, workers who could work in factories. And so we wanted students to be on time, be able to take directions, be compliant, do those things. And I think those ghosts still exist in schools. And where nowadays we need kids to be critical thinkers. We need them to be collaborators. We need them to be self-resilient and be able to do tasks at hand and think creatively and do something different. And so, but yet our system, I think there's still those ghosts that really say, you need to be compliant, you need to be compliant, you need to be compliant. And so it's going to take a long time to break that down. And again, I do think gaming matches up with all this, because all those skills we want kids to have, it can be explored through gaming in a very safe way for kids.
I think that's one of the side benefits. Well, like, the pandemic sucks, obviously, but that's one of the benefits of the pandemic in some ways, is that people have been more creative with teaching, think more about the kids, and kind of break some of the shackles of the curriculum too. So I'm hoping that we're closer. Maybe, like I said, hopefully there's some good things that come out of this. But because my neck's getting sore because I keep nodding at everything you're saying. Like, it's amazing. Thank you.
I think one thing that just keeps rolling around in my mind when we were talking about, the passion of teachers, and if teachers show passion in what they're interested in, that's completely transferable in lots of cases directly to those students, right? And I just think, with the risk taking, is we 100% need to think about our assessment and just how we're grading students. And Matteo and I were having a conversation earlier before Warren and Mike and Dean, before you guys got here, and we were just talking about how Matteo and I, we both have taken pass-fail classes before, right? And those types of environments, I think lots of people would think that, if it's just pass-fail, you're just going to give your minimal amount of effort. But I think in lots of cases too, you don't get that, but you get opportunities to go outside your comfort zone and those boxes to kind of take those risks, right? Whereas what we were saying about the traditional game of school, that just kind of, you find something that works and you go with it. So I think we definitely just need to find a different approach, but it's definitely, it's hard to do when we're kind of tied to kind of the big data and that sort of thing as well. But I think, should we move on to the next question there, Matteo?
Oh, sure. I just want to say I really like the imagery that education's haunted. Like, we're totally haunted by like our the past, and definitely games lower the stakes. And I know in the course I'm in, where it's pass fail, like, I've taken risks that I would have never have taken if it was a more traditional, graded course. But yeah, go for it, Curtis.
Glenwood School is actually over 110 years old and has a big bell tower, so it may actually be haunted.
Mike's actually going to talk literally about ghosts in the school.
Okay, so our next question here is, both of you are big proponents of D&D. Can you briefly tell us what that is, and have you had any success integrating this into your schools? What board games have you incorporated into your schools, and what sort of feedback have you gotten from students and parents? Whoever wants to go, you guys
Mike,
can
do you
fight
want to
over
start,
it.
or do you want me to jump in?
Well, I could jump in with the what it looks like in our school. I guess first of all, a quick overview of Dungeons and Dragons is it's a board game without a board. It's mostly done in imagination, and it's a fantasy role-playing game where one person is the head of it, or the dungeon master, who runs kind of the show, and then the rest of the people form a party, and you go around solving problems, doing things inside the game. Be how I describe it. It's actually been an absolute star for our school during the pandemic, because we can't get physically close enough to play board games, but we can spread out in a room and have, I run a group once a week, and another girl from grade 5-6 actually, who started it up at our school this year, came in and said, "Hey, I want to start Dungeons and Dragons." I was like, "I'm all in." And we had at one point up to 25 students who were interesting, creative. You create characters, you create the scenarios, or you could take it from a book, either way. And so I sit with my group of 7 students, and we go through these scenarios every week. And you see students who are normally mild-mannered, and they aren't able to hold on for just a sec, please. Sorry, more editing for you.
Not a worry.
I love Dungeons and Dragons. I used to play that back in the day, but it always reminds me of Stranger Things.
But is it ever possible to have a game that's not like 5 or 6 hours long?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, sorry for that. I had a bunch of background noise here. So in playing the Dungeon Dragon game with the students, we run through a scenario, and what we get done in lunch hour is what we get done in a lunch hour, and then we cut it short. And we've seen students who are meek and mild turn into just ferocious, either fighters or spellcasters or whatever it is in there, and they take on the characters. There's artwork involved with it. There's imagination. There's a ton of laughter. So that has been absolutely wonderful for our school, because it has given us one of the few clubs that we could actually bring back during the pandemic.
Oh, that's nice, Mike. That's cool. Mike and I have been part of the same adventuring group now going on 10 years. 10 years ago, we were in the same school. And at the time, the math teacher, who's now retired, who's still our DM, we formed a group with the history teacher. And since that time, we've added another friend who's another administrator. So it's 5 of us educators get together. And since I would say probably June, we've been getting together once a week, actually. It's funny how you mentioned earlier about, there's some takeaways from the pandemic that maybe we'll see if they'll continue. Some of the challenges of being able to get together in the same room are taken away with, meetings just like we are now over Zoom. And we've been able to carve out a time that kind of works for us. And that's our Friday nights. And let me tell you, there's nothing better way to start a weekend than going off and killing some orcs. It just, sets the mood for to bring on the weekend in a very good way. I'll just add to Mike. Yeah, we have a D&D group in our building as well. We didn't run it this year yet. We're going to look at seeing if we can do it online as we're in our second semester, as we get some other clubs up and running. So I'm looking forward to that. What's kind of neat is, and this is pretty new for us, we just started the D&D club last year in our school. But what was so interesting was how much care the kids took in creating their characters. So often you kind of piece together some things. You have an idea of, okay, I want this character to, go down this road, so I'll have these abilities later. For our guys, it was a real character workshop. It's kind of neat. And I think this might be something I don't know, like maybe a future thesis somewhere about how you can, do D&D as a point of, maybe identity exploration or something like that, because the amount of care that these guys took in creating their characters and their backstories and, every nuance of every skill that they have and reasons why, it really was like watching a student do like a personality test. It was like, it was almost like they were kind of bringing out some things in themselves and expressing through these characters, which was kind of wild. And like what Mike spoke to, that's one of the things I like about D&D is, it's all creative conversations and storytelling. And so all of a sudden you encounter a stranger on the road. Well, there's a couple different ways you can approach this. You can be diplomatic and, try and engage a conversation. You can be forceful. You can do avoidance. And so it's kind of these, maybe not real life scenarios because, you're going to meet a wizard, but at least, it gets people thinking about, okay, how are we going to resolve this? Like what things do we need to be thinking about? What's our goal? What skills do you have that complement my skills? It's another way of creating those skills that we've been talking about. So for those interests, I enjoy AD&D, and of course, now we've got with the other guys, we got such a shorthand that it really is about the laughs and just having a good time and seeing it through. So
I'll jump in on the second part of your question there about what other board games we've implemented. One example, one of our teachers right now is growing a garden as her class project. Gardening is her passion, so she's brought her students along with her, and as part of that, they're playing the board game Photosynthesis, which is a game where basically, to summarize it, you're competing, your tree is competing for light, and so they're understanding that dynamic in nature through a board game and also playing against each other. I've crafted all the schools I've been at. We've made basically board game library, and I've crafted to try and make sure that we have each type of mechanic. Or not each one because there's a ton, but many mechanics in the library so people can play dice or a worker placement or an area control game in order to be exposed to as many different games as they can so that they can bring those skills back into either presentations or game design themselves. Because for me, that's kind of the ultimate goal of these clubs, and that is that in the end, we're going to end up with designers coming out of it, or at least a design mindset to be able to help with problem solving.
And it's amazing how quickly that can happen. This past summer, I was the VP of our Summer Learning Academy program, a program that Mike was once upon a time the principal for. And we extended it this last year to include camps for kids, one of them being a games camp. But we have all kinds of camps. We have some in the morning, some in the afternoon. And we had a crew of about 12 kids who were doing both the morning and the afternoon. So we had them over lunch. And we thought, okay, you know what? Since we got a little bit of time, let's break out a game. And we actually ended up playing Uno, something very simple, because we had kids from different ages, taking in these camps. But it's amazing how all of a sudden they became a group. Like all of a sudden in a very short time, like we were running 1 week camps. These people had like all of a sudden developed a real shorthand with each other, and it became this sort of little micro community within our bigger community. And that's just because, you know what, we carved out 45 minutes at lunchtime to just sit down and play Uno together.
What a powerful way to incorporate different ages in your schools too, right? And I'm just thinking, I teach and work in rural Saskatchewan, and lots of our schools are K-12. So to even like start up like a club, or just either infuse it within your curriculum, but to have those kind of cross grade opportunities would be what a rewarding experience for the students.
Yeah, and I know Mike's got a great example of a student all of a sudden becoming a leader in their group because, now it's their turn to explain the game and teach it to others. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden they get, take on these roles. I'm not sure if you want to share that, Mike. Sorry to put you on the spot. No,
absolutely. I will, because it was one of those things that it came out of, like, we're being brutally honest. I started doing the games things because I love them, right? And then I'm doing them with the students and trying to have that joy of gaming going on to them. But when one of the board game clubs I ran, we had at any one time 5 or 6 students in the group who had special needs and who during the day had an educational assistant basically attach with them so they could be successful in their school day. And then they have 30 students in a library after school, and they could go for an hour and a half without problems. And so one of those students, a boy who had autism, he came in, was very shy to be part of the group, but the games provided structure. You sat down, you played, there was rules to follow. He enjoyed the group, and he ended up, exactly as Warren had alluded to, teaching others games. And one of the reasons that motivated me to start Game, along with just doing what I love, of course, was his mother came to me after school one day, and she was crying because she never thought that her son would be able to socially interact with other students for a period of time more than a few minutes. And he was spending an hour and a half, and he's stepping up and becoming a leader, and people were listening to him. So this mom was totally in tears. And that's when I realized there's more here than just, if the casual, oh, you're just playing games, right? So that I don't know if it's a stigma. It's probably a stigma that we have, that because we've created Game, and sitting around the table with all these very serious groups, and then people say, oh, it's game. But there is a core to what we do that I'd say is just as important for students to be able to have a place where they belong.
Well, have you guys got pushback from parents or from administration or other stakeholders, the community? Do they kind of look at you guys and, hey, this isn't right?
Well, that's the great thing, is that we are the administration. So I talk to myself, I say, hey, that's a good idea, and it ends up okay. No, it's...
So you don't answer to anybody else? Like the people aren't...
No, we do. We, of course, we have our chain of command, but it was easier for us to get going when in our positions. I was a vice principal and the teacher librarian at the time that I really started to fire this stuff up. So I controlled both the receiving and giving end of it. So that was... made it a little bit easier. And quite often at our Game conference, we will actually teachers will talk about the hurdles they have to overcome. And it is convincing either administration or colleagues that this is valuable. And so that's where we try to assist them. I mean, we'll make calls for them if we need to, but we give them the information and examples that they need to be able to get started, because it doesn't have to be everything all at once. With all of us, it was small beginnings and then ended up growing.
Yeah, and Mike's right. We're very fortunate to be in the positions we are, because in any school, if something's important, you do one of two things. You either make time for it, so you make it part of your schedule, or you make it part of your budget. You establish it. And of course, being in those leadership roles, we can do that quite comfortably. And the moment that you give other people permission to say, yeah, actually, no, you know what, games is a critical component to school, and they'll embrace it and they'll run with it, and they'll come say, hey, you know what, we have also noticed is this might be a really good game for this class for the student, and they'd be like, yeah, absolutely, let's try and make that happen. Well, we've definitely gotten snickers though, like that's for sure. Like I said, when we get together as we represent Game, and there's other groups at the table who are very I would say very much part of the institution of education, and they look over and they look at us who are laughing in the corner, like they probably think we just emerged from our basements, from a D&D session or something. So we do get snickers in that way, and then sometimes just when we talk to other folks, even our colleagues, sometimes they're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. But you know what? Definitely, it's even in the last, I would say, 3 years that we've been doing this, the climate's definitely shifted. Like when we first started this, we were kind of hoping, hey, our goal is 50 people. If we get 50 people out for our Sage group and come out for our conference, and they enjoy games, man, we're going to have such a great time. And it turned out we got over 200, and we're like, whoa, there's this many people out here who want to talk about this many educators who want to talk about gaming in classrooms and what that can look like. And then a year later, we hit over 500. And so there's definitely, an appetite. And there's a belief that, this isn't just a fly by night. Hey, you know what, let's just do this because it seems kind of fun and interesting. And there's way more to it than that. And certainly any time that we can bring a little bit of play into what we do, it does have its benefits.
Well, you think about, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
I say the core to almost everything that we're talking about is you think about something that you enjoy doing and how much effort you put into something that you have to learn, but that you enjoy. an example, we switch up our D&D nights and we play a board game that's out right now called King's Dilemma. And it's a game that's designed to be done with, in person, but there's, some people put together a bit of a Excel spreadsheet of how to keep track of it if you are distancing. And I went and I did a bunch of stuff with that. And I probably put in 15 to 20 hours of work to try and tweak this experience for the players so that we could play this game and have it be a ton of fun. If you told me I had to put 15 or 20 hours into something else, I'd be like, forget it, right? And because some of it is tedious, actual like Excel worksheet stuff, right? And but because I'm motivated and I love this stuff, that's what we're hoping. That's what we want people to see, is that's the key to the engagement and the learning, is make sure that they're interested in it, and then the rest will come. So
I'm totally loving you guys' passion. It's coming through the airwaves for sure here. So what's like one experience, like you guys have shared so much and there's so much to think about afterwards and unpack, but what's maybe one experience that you didn't expect, kind of going with the game theme, or maybe just something that's kind of a weird or a fun fact, that this whole experience has had in an educational setting?
Well, one thing I think is kind of interesting is in our last session, which wasn't this year, unfortunately, we had, because of, again, pandemic, we couldn't run our typical conference. But the conference before that, we actually learned of some folks from other organizations, from other education organizations, coming in to say, okay, what are these guys doing exactly? And I thought that was kind of interesting, like in the fact that, we definitely, people, I guess there's a bit of a buzz, I guess is ultimately what I was thinking, because ultimately we were just hoping to be a bit of an umbrella to create a network for teachers to talk to teachers from other buildings about, hey, how do you do gaming? How do you do game? What game is good? What do we like? And all those pieces. And I guess it's kind of been a little bit bigger than that. Of course, you hope that it's always bigger than, kind of things grow to be bigger than you want them, or that you anticipate that they could be. But all of a sudden you kind of take back going, okay, so definitely we're doing something that's creating attention from others, I guess, is ultimately. And so I found that kind of interesting in all this.
Yeah, I would say my biggest surprise, or the thing that I would refer to, is the story I already told about the student who, like, the effect that I had on the family and student just by running a games club, and the difference that made in a student's life. Some of the quirky facts and stuff like that is something that we haven't talked about. All the things that you learn in gaming. One thing that I've learned through gaming is patience, and that's just because I play with Warren. So he takes longer than any other human to take a turn on Earth.
I can't argue.
Patience is a virtue, right?
I think Mike has a different sense of time. When it's his turn, it happens differently than when it's my turn.
Going on to our next question here is, what is the biggest challenge to using gaming in education, in your experience?
Go ahead, Warren.
I would just say sometimes, there's certainly one of the biggest challenges is just not thinking that it is a silver bullet. And I'm just thinking of one example of working with a teacher who brought some gamification into the math class, and there's definitely, it was like, from my perspective, it was pretty awesome in the sense of, all of a sudden, instead of a test, the test was referred to as the big baddie, whatever that was at that time. But, there's always going to be, no matter what you embrace and bring into a classroom, there's always going to be bumps. And certainly, I think with gamification in particular, there's always that challenge of, is what you're doing, is not just a glorified point system, or what you're doing, it's just, you're just kind of skimming the top of really what we need to do. And once this whole fad gets over with, we'll get down to what the real work's going to be. And so I think the real challenge is and I don't think I'm saying legitimizing, but just having the patience to see it through. Because I think sometimes, it's easy to bring something in and then it may not quite unfold the way we want it to. And then go, okay, well, that didn't work. What am I going to try next? And again, I think Mike mentioned it earlier that it doesn't have to be big. It can be small. It can be small things. And I mentioned the teacher who just, turned up some terminology. And so I think it's about maybe finding that sort of fun, playful mindset to bring some things in and to let it grow. And then, you know what, if it takes a turn, or if it takes, not quite the results you want, well, we can retool. We can, find another way to do things, or look at a different way of approaching it. But I think probably one of the biggest challenges is there's still, and again, I'm not sure if it would necessarily say stigma, because it seems less and less of that happening. But certainly there's still, let's just wait and see if this really is something that can help, or is this just something that will go away in time and just be another thing in education that so many people say, oh, here's the next thing coming down the pipeline. Because I do think there's value in gaming, and certainly people have been gaming for a long, long time. There's something there for certain. And I think as educators, we can, piggyback what works for us, but it's not going to be carbon copy. What works in one school is going to work in the next. You're going to have to kind of work through it a little bit, and it can be powerful. So I would say the biggest challenge is just that, because I think there's going to be some people who are going to tip a toe in it and then be like, no, rather than, well, let's just start small and start playful and not expect it to be a magic bullet. Let's just, take our time.
Hopping off of that, it's a parallel for what we do in project-based learning as well. Both of them are so intertwined with that that element of having to push forward through it, but also the amount of work that goes into it. Like it's kind of crazy to hear. To do a good gaming club, you have to put in a ton of work, not only in, of course, the planning and the purchasing and the thinking about it, but the preparation of the games, the storage of them, how you organize them in the box so that you can actually get them out. Because if you've ever had to put together a complex game on the table, that can take 20 to 30 minutes and you're going to lose all the kids in there. So it's being willing to, have the passion behind it, to be able to jump in and do all those piddly things behind the scenes that aren't a lot of fun, to ensure that the students get the most out of the use of those games.
I think we've had such a good conversation, and there's so many more questions we could ask. But I guess,
you guys back on again. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe so in this whole COVID world that we got going on right now in education, there's some hope that we can sort of, I guess, to use your language, Warren, or your imagery, like to dispel some of the ghosts of the past and maybe try something new, try something different, something more relevant to like today's skills, 21st century skills. So I'm just going to ask this question. If you could wave a magic wand and drastically change one thing in education right now, what would you change?
Well, for me, I think I would change this mindset that PISA defines the outcomes that we need to listen to in a global context. I see so many challenges with that. All the skills that we talked about today that, we want our students to have: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration. That's not tested on PISA. But yet somehow the narrative that is beyond our classrooms in terms of the value of what education is, it seems to be defined of, okay, where do we rank? And of course, right now, Manitoba, we're behind other provinces, but don't call us lagging. Like across the world, we're in the top percentages of most places. But just because we're behind other places that maybe don't spend quite as much on per capita, well, you know what? That doesn't mean that we're not getting the job done. Rather, it's, there's certain things that we need to be responsive to our communities for, and that needs to be the conversation. Let's talk about inequity. Let's talk about poverty. Let's talk about these things and how schools can have a role in making for a better community. Let's not talk about PISA. So that's my magic wand moment.
And my magic wand will be, little bit less away from the reality of Warren's comments, of the realities that we're facing, I would wave an engagement wand. I wish that every student could come to school and put in as much effort and be as engaged as they are with whatever their passion is. And we're talking about games and video games, which we know can suck in. If you're video gamers, you can all of a sudden realize you've been on a game for 100 hours and you're like, what, so that's what I would wish for, is that we could have that, because something that we try to talk about all the time in anywhere that I've been is, guess what, we can have fun doing this too, right? Like, this is not, our profession is not all about slogging through, right? We can have fun doing this stuff. And so that's, it sounds simplistic, and people can brush it off and say, well, you got to get serious. Well, absolutely, we are dead serious about making sure that we have things right for kids, but it doesn't mean that we have to be miserable. We can have a lot of fun with our students, and our students can have fun in our schools.
Amen. Well said, Mike.
Mic drop.
Yeah, I mean, not much else to be said. That's definitely what you guys are doing in your schools is probably a path to that, I would think. And you definitely have a lot of lucky staff. It sounds like a great place to work. Are you guys, sorry, I didn't look into this, but are you all Louis Riel School Division?
Yeah, we're both Louis Riel. Actually, we're not too far from each other. We're probably Mike, maybe a 5-minute drive.
Kilometer and a bit apart from each other.
So, like, is everybody on game Louis Riel? More like the executive, anyways.
On the executive.
No, Nicole is from French Immersion School from another division.
Yes.
But we do, a lot of it is Louis Riel based, but game is. We purposely, last conference, because we grew so much, we said we need more people from everywhere. And so, yeah, we're always looking. And I would also temper, of course, that you talk about being in our buildings. You also have to remember that with us also comes a fair amount of disorganization, and you're never going to be told, I micromanage you to do this, which is what some people actually like. So our style isn't for everyone. We know that as well. So. Yeah.
Well, I can only hope that Dean and Curtis leave Saskatchewan and come to Manitoba and work in Winnipeg. I mean, my dream.
I can't cheer for the Bombers, though, so.
Yeah, you got to take off that toque, Dean.
I'm not going to lie. We were recording already, but when I saw the toque, I was almost going to say, I'm out. Like,
like a Winnipeg Blue Bomber Grey Cup champion T-shirt to help ease with the transition.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to send you one.
Sure, it's all good.
Yeah, we'll even give it to you for free, Dean. If you wear it. Yeah, thanks, Mike and Warren, for doing this, and thank you so much for the conversation.
Oh, this was great. This is a ton of fun. I have to say, it's a great way to spend an afternoon.
Yeah. No,
Thank you, guys. It's so awesome chatting with you.
You've been listening to 832 Sips, the podcast. I'm Curtis Barassa.
I'm Dean Venderman.
And I'm Mateo DeMuro.
Until
next time. Cheers.